Senator Josh Hawley's book canceled by publisher citing deadly insurrection to Capitol building in an extraordinary move. Simon & Schuster announced Thursday that it would no longer publish a planned book by Senator Josh Hawley, one of the Republican lawmakers who led objections to Congress certifying President-elect Joe Biden's victory. After witnessing the disturbing, deadly insurrection that took place on Wednesday in Washington, D.C., Simon & Schuster has decided to cancel publication of Senator Josh Hawley's forthcoming book, the company said in a statement. "We did not come to this decision lightly," Simon & Schuster added. "As a publisher, it will always be our mission to amplify a variety of voices and viewpoints. At the same time, we take seriously our larger public responsibility as citizens, and cannot support Senator Hawley after his role in what became a dangerous threat to our democracy and freedom." Hawley in a statement responded to Simon & Schuster's decision by calling the move Orwellian and a direct assault on the First Amendment, even though as a graduate of Yale Law School he likely knows the First Amendment is about government restricting free speech and not forcing a private company to publish his work. "Only approved speech can now be published," Hawley lamented. "This is the left looking to cancel everyone they don't approve of. I will fight this cancel culture with everything I have. We'll see you in court." Hawley's forthcoming book, titled The Tyranny of Big Tech, was scheduled to be published in June 2021. In the book, Hawley was set to argue major tech companies represent the gravest threat to American liberty since the monopolies of the Gilded Age, according to a description posted on Simon & Schuster's website. 4 people died on Wednesday when supporters of President Donald Trump, angered after being lied to about the election being stolen, stormed Capitol Hill and forced a temporary halt to a congressional procedure to certify the election results. Hawley, cheered on by Trump, had been one of the leading Republican senators egging on efforts to object to the largely ceremonial proceedings. After order was restored in the Capitol on Wednesday, and following some Republican objections, Congress early Thursday morning ultimately did certify Biden as the winner of the 2020 presidential elections. Biden to nominate Merrick Garland as Attorney General. President-elect Joe Biden has decided to nominate Judge Merrick Garland as Attorney General. People familiar with the matter tell CNN. A long-awaited decision that moved toward completion Wednesday as it became apparent that Democrats were on the brink of winning control of the Senate. The announcement of the Attorney General, along with other senior leaders of the Justice Department, is expected to be made as soon as Thursday as Biden moves closer to filling the remaining seats in his cabinet before assuming power on January 20. Biden has selected Lisa Monaco, a former Homeland Security advisor in the Obama administration who has become a close aide to Biden, to be the Deputy Attorney General, according to a person familiar with the decision. The president-elect has selected Vanita Gupta, who served as Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General and led the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice under President Barack Obama, to be Associate Attorney General, and Kristen Clark, the President and Executive Director of the National Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law, to be Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, the person said. Garland was chosen by Biden for Attorney General over former Alabama Senator Doug Jones and former Acting Attorney General Sally Yates, the 2 other finalists for the position. While Garland has been a top contender for weeks, concerns about the vacancy his selection would create on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia raised alarm bells among Biden and many advisors who believed Senate Republicans would block any nomination to that seat. But with Democrats poised to control the Senate after 2 Georgia runoff races, those concerns were allayed. Judge Garland will be viewed in a whole new light now, a top Biden ally tells CNN. Politico first reported the pick late last month. Biden told reporters he was not waiting until the Georgia races were finished to make his decision. But this week, that's exactly what he is doing. Advisors insist a variety of factors led to the decision of Garland, but acknowledge that the long, often criticized deliberations of Biden actually paid off in this case. Garland, who in recent weeks has stepped away from hearing cases on the bench to prepare for the prospect of the nomination, steadily emerged as a leading contender over the last 2 months since Biden won the election. The revelation that there is a federal investigation into the taxes and business dealings of Hunter Biden, the president-elect's son, also contributed to those pushing Garland. Defenders of Garland argued he would be a particularly strong choice to lead the Justice Department in the post-Trump era because he is seen as above reproach of partisan politics. Some allies describe him as a Boy Scout, which is intended to suggest he would be seen as a non-political figure. In the end, a confluence of factors drove the decision. But people familiar with the matter say it's largely because of how Biden believes Garland can rise above politics in the post-Trump era. President Donald Trump's escalating post-election antics have solidified Biden's view of choosing Garland, people familiar with the matter say. As Biden believes the nation demands competence and craves unity, Obama nominated Garland to the Supreme Court after a vacancy was created by the death of Justice Antonin Scalia in 2016. But Republicans, led by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, refused for months to hold confirmation hearings or the required vote in the chamber. When Trump took office, Garland's nomination expired and he returned to his position as Chief Judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. The court is charged with reviewing challenges to administrative agencies. He stepped down from the position as Chief Judge in February 2028, but still serves on the court. President Bill Clinton appointed him to the court in 1997. Prior to his appointment as a U.S. Circuit Judge, Garland served as Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General. He supervised the investigation of the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, which killed more than 160 people and injured several hundred more. Garland also led the investigations of the 1996 Olympics bombing in Atlanta, in which 2 people died and more than 100 others were injured. Garland led the investigation into Ted Kaczynski, also known as the Unabomber, who is currently serving 8 life sentences for murder. He killed 3 people and injured more than 20 others with a string of mail bombings. The judge served as an assistant U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia from 1989 to 1992, and as Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Criminal Division of the Justice Department from 1993 to 1994. Garland's nomination will disappoint those who had pressured Biden to nominate a person of color as Attorney General. Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris met last month with civil rights leaders and members of the NAACP, who have been pressuring Biden to diversify his cabinet and create a position within the White House for a civil rights czar. The Rev. Al Sharpton said at a news conference after the meeting that Biden should choose an attorney general with a civil rights background and said his preference would be a black nominee. Sharpton said mentioned as potential picks former Massachusetts Governor DeWalt Patrick and Tony West, the senior vice president and chief legal officer at Uber, who was previously the Associate Attorney General of the United States under the Obama administration. Clark said at the same news conference that whoever is selected as Attorney General must have a clear and bold record when it comes to civil rights and racial justice. This story has been updated with additional reporting and background information about Garland. Former Defense Secretary Mattis says Trump fomented the security breach at the U.S. Capitol. Former Defense Secretary James Mattis has directly blamed President Donald Trump for having fomented the security breach at the U.S. Capitol Wednesday, which he labeled an effort to subjugate American democracy by mob rule. Mattis was among the former top Pentagon officials who served under Trump, including former Defense Secretary Mark Esper and retired Gen. Joseph Dunford, who also blamed political leaders spreading misinformation about the presidential debate as setting the groundwork for the violence at the Capitol. Today's violent assault on our Capitol, an effort to subjugate American democracy by mob rule, who was fomented by Mr. Trump, said Mattis, who served as Trump's first Secretary of Defense. In a statement provided to ABC News, enough is enough. Former Defense Secretary Mattis blasts President Trump over handling of protests, his use of the presidency to destroy trust in our election and to poison our respect for fellow citizens has been enabled by pseudo-political leaders, whose names will live in infamy as profiles in cowardice, he added. Our Constitution and our Republic will overcome this stain, and we the people will come together again in our never-ending effort to form a more perfect union, while Mr. Trump will deservedly be left a man without a country. Retired Marine General Joseph Dunford, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under Trump, issued a rare statement regarding Wednesday's violence. Trump denies ordering protesters forcibly removed for church photo op. His comments are noteworthy, as he has kept his opinions on political events quiet since his retirement. I believe our leaders, who have continued to undermine a peaceful transition in accordance with our Constitution, have set the conditions for today's violence, he said in a statement provided to ABC News. This is an outrageous assault on our democracy and a sad day for our nation, Dunford added. It's time for all Americans, and particularly our elected officials, to put our country first. As many have said, we're better than this. Mark Esper, who succeeded Mattis as Defense Secretary, said the Capitol breach was appalling and un-American. The perpetrators who committed this illegal act were inspired by partisan misinformation and patently false claims about the election, Esper tweeted. This must end now for the good of the Republic. Esper was fired by Trump after he fell out of favor with him in June when he came out against Trump's desire to invoke the Insurrection Act and use active-duty military troops against Black Lives Matter protesters. As this transition plays out over the next 2 weeks, I am confident the U.S. military will stay out of politics and remain true to its sworn oath to support and defend the Constitution and the American people, as the most trusted and respected institution in the country, Esper said. What America looked like today. Ugly, tweeted Dunford's predecessor, retired Army General Martin Dempsey. And how sad that we have to confront the fact we may be no better than countries we often criticize, Dempsey said. But despite all of that, we still can be. 535 members of the House and Senate can make that choice for us. Hopefully. Missed warning signs and failure to fortify U.S. Capitol bewilder experts. Political leaders demanded late Wednesday to know why law enforcement did not better fortify the United States Capitol after extremist groups for days chattered online about their plans to react violently to the final formal step of certifying President Donald Trump's 2020 election defeat. How did so many rioters get into this building from so many directions? How was it breached? Representative Karen Bass, a California Democrat and House Judiciary Committee member, told ABC News. You saw people with ropes scaling the building. You normally can't even get into this building with a purse. Ken Cuccinelli, the Department of Homeland Security's acting deputy secretary, told ABC News he was quite surprised to watch on television an instance in which the doors of the Capitol were breached with no obvious police resistance, even as U.S. Capitol police officers with shields withstood the force of a mob armed with pepper spray at other locations. All of us in law enforcement have been planning for this for a number of days, Cuccinelli said. This is all going to get analyzed. It really is going to have to be looked at more. Capitol breached by pro-Trump mob during failed insurrection. Woman shot inside eyes. U.S. Capitol Police, which is the lead agency in protecting the hallowed structure, could not be reached for comment. The potential for a mob of President Trump's supporters to launch an assault on the Capitol was not explicitly laid out by extremist groups. But there were red flags and warning signs widely circulating on social media and flagged to law enforcement in the run-up to Wednesday's unprecedented breach. Internal bulletins and intelligence reports obtained by ABC News show. Intelligence reports widely circulated among federal law enforcement agencies included scores of social media posts condoning unruly actions similar to those that unfolded Wednesday. A December 29 report by the online extremism watchdog group Cite quoted a right-wing activist saying, "I really don't care if people break into Congress and drag these politicians out in the streets." In one video cited in the report, agitators encouraged each other to attend the event armed and prepare for violence, the report said. The report concluded that extremist far-right and conspiratorial groups would use the Jan. 6 pro-Trump protest to act on online threats. Based on the fairly straightforward intelligence that thousands of angry people were going to come and show their presence, including groups prone to violence, law enforcement was totally ill-prepared to handle today's incident, said ABC News contributor Brad Garrett, a former FBI special agent. "This was a phenomenal law enforcement failure. Federal and local law enforcement were openly talking about security concerns they harbored in the days leading up to Wednesday's Stop the Steal rally in Washington." One federal official briefed on the situation told ABC News that concerns about violence were not a secret. The official said it's not clear why more action was not taken with so much advance notice. More, as chaos erupts at Capitol, officials lambast Trump for rhetoric that fanned flames. Mary McCord, a Georgetown law professor and former federal prosecutor, said federal agencies that protect the nation's most sacred and hallowed offices had gathered ample information ahead of the assault on the Capitol. "I don't know why the Capitol Police were so unprepared," McCord said. Her alarm at the ease with which the protest mob moved across the National Mall, over modest fortifications, and into the Capitol, was shared by members of Congress. Committee on House Administration Chairperson Zoe Lofgren, a California Democrat, said the breach raises grave security concerns. "I intend to have the Committee on House Administration work with the bipartisan House and Senate leadership to address these concerns and review the response in coming days," she said. Rep. Bass, a former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, told ABC News she believes a full investigation needs to happen. "I have always felt safe at the Capitol," Bass said. "It would have never dawned on me that this is the place where I needed to be afraid." Jay Johnson, who served as Secretary of Homeland Security under President Barack Obama, said he believes there could have been adequate security in place to prevent this from happening. "Not only was Wednesday's breach predictable," said ABC News contributor Garrett, "but in a city so accustomed to mass gatherings, it should have been a routine law enforcement exercise to fortify against it." More timeline: how pro-Trump protesters stormed the Capitol. This should have been a classic anti-riot operation for a law enforcement agency, where a perimeter is set up in advance. Crowds are channeled away from their target location, and reinforcements are called in from the National Guard or other federal agencies, Garrett said. "I just can't imagine that the Capitol Police didn't go through the drill." Former U.S. Capitol Police Chief Kim Dine told ABC News that, more than anything, the day's events were so tragic on so many levels, it literally is hard to describe. Dine said the breach was no doubt the worst nightmare for a department dedicated to protecting that place, those people, the democratic process. "There's no question about it, there's a whole lot of work to be done." Authorities on high alert as pro-Trump supporters flood D.C. to protest election. Hundreds of law enforcement officers have mobilized across Washington as thousands of supporters who refuse to accept President Donald Trump's election loss have flocked to the nation's capital to protest when Congress gathers Wednesday afternoon to put the final stamp on President-elect Joe Biden's victory. As part of their preparations, police posted signs around the district warning of the illegality of gun possession during protests as Trump tweeted his support for the protesters, saying, "Our country has had enough, they won't take it anymore, and we hear you and love you," from the Oval Office. Authorities, a mix that includes local police, National Guard and federal uniformed officers, had already arrested several people